Well, welcome, Greg, and welcome, Bryan, calling from Canada. How are you?
Very well.
Great, thanks very much.
Good. Well, it's very exciting to have you here, and thanks for joining us. I was really thrilled when I received your film, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. So thank you very much. I just wanted to, if I may, first of all, to camera, if anyone's watching this interview and they haven't seen the film yet, I really recommend you should watch the film because there will be spoilers, okay? Because we have to talk about what happens in this film. So, Greg, my first question's for you. Just to give some context to Mount Waddington, it's 4,000 meters high, which is 3 times the height of Ben Nevis, which is the UK's highest mountain. So it's a big mountain. And I think you say in the film that the Mondays first spotted it from Vancouver Island, I think it says. How far is that? 100 miles?
Yeah, it's about a couple of 100 miles from. So I mean, the Mondays thought they could see a very high peak far off to the north on the mainland. They probably didn't see Mount Waddington. They probably saw something else, but they were sure that they'd seen something, a very high mountain in an area of the province that hadn't been mapped yet, that hadn't been explored yet. And that's really what set this whole thing off.
Okay, but either way, this is a considerable mountain. So how were you persuaded to go on this, frankly, I hope you don't mind me saying, Bryan, slightly crazy expedition? You know, what were you thinking of when you got involved in this?
When I got involved with this, I'd been working in television for over a decade, mostly as a writer, and I had seen a film called Maru, which was an American mountaineering film, which I really, really enjoyed. I found it very inspiring, and I kind of thought, well, why can't I do something like this? And a couple of years later, I joined the Alpine Club of Canada, and I was visiting one of their huts, one of their climbing huts, and I came across this guy who, at the time, he had put out his back and he was in a lot of pain, and he was kind of hanging out at the fire pit at the hut. But he was looking for a cameraman. He was looking for a filmmaker for a project he was putting together to do a reenactment of a historic climb in the mountains of British Columbia. And it was kind of a good fit because I was looking for a project that would take me into kind of mountaineering films, and he was looking for a filmmaker. And that's kind of how we got together.
And that was Bryan.
That was Bryan, exactly.
Okay. So Bryan, this film is when I saw it, I thought, here we go. This is a mountain expedition film. I immediately put it into that pigeonhole. But unlike most mountain expedition films, there isn't a mountain in it, really. I mean, there is a mountain in it, but it's a long way away, and you never actually get near that. So I asked myself, well, what is this film actually about then? You know, what is the dominant theme? And it seems to me that it turns into a film that's got a lot to do with leadership and team dynamics. Would you agree with that? And how did it feel being the focus of that shifting story?
Certainly, that's what ended up being what the whole expedition was about. A lot of lessons learned, no doubt. Our primary objective actually wasn't to climb Mount Waddington. That would have been a bonus. But we formed the Canadian Explorations Heritage Society for the purpose of educating Canadians about how these intrepid explorers 100 years ago went out exploring these pristine wilderness areas in our country. And so the purpose of our expedition was for us to experience what it was like for those explorers 100 years ago using the gear and equipment they had, going into places that were unknown. So for us, it was all about the experience. The plan was, of course, to try to climb the mountain, as that was the Mondays plan in their 1926 expedition, which they didn't get to do on that expedition either. Yeah. But the primary purpose was, can modern climbers who are used to their modern amenities and their creature comforts, can we hack it out in the wilderness the way those people went so bravely 100 years ago?
Yeah. It's an incredible thing to watch. And I think actually I might say, I think it was probably harder in some ways for you than it was for them, because their gear would have been tried and trusted, and they would have had confidence in their kit, right?
They would have been climbing in that kind of stuff their whole lives.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, it was all trial and error. In a lot of cases, you can't get that kind of equipment today, and we had to make some of our things that were falling apart, basically, as we went along, because we hadn't tried and tested how to make them properly.
Yes. I think you're 5 minutes in the film and something breaks. Greg, you were behind the camera for the film. Did you do you have a nice cozy tent that was off camera?
Yes, I did have a nice cozy tent that was off camera. Occasionally, you can catch glimpses of it in the film if you look closely. It's a small orange 2-man tent. It was very comfortable. It had a nice protection from mosquitoes, from all bugs. So I had somewhere comfortable to sleep every night, and it was very nice. Yeah, very necessary.
The mosquitoes were quite something. We have mosquitoes here, obviously in Scotland, particularly, but not. I mean, those are like small birds. They were immense. They absolutely horrendous.
Well, the whole area we went through is very swampy. It's very wet, very swampy, and the mosquitoes were just phenomenal and relentless. I mean, there were very few places that we passed through in the valley that didn't have these just massive mosquitoes.
Yeah, I was intrigued by some of the landscape. The maze of death, I think it was called, where all the trees were falling down. It looked actually comical, but also quite dangerous. I mean, how did you sort of get all your gear, cameras and so forth across?
It was definitely a dangerous area. The only way to cross it was these tree bridges, these sort of huge fallen trees, and you'd use them as bridges, and you'd be balancing on them with maybe 65 pounds on your back. So there's really no room for error. Because if you fall, you're going to get seriously injured. Yeah. And this is not a place where search and rescue can get to easily. There's nowhere to land a helicopter. So like if you fall, you're in real trouble.
Yeah. Bryan, there's a wonderful bit where you find the bridge across the river there, and you're absolutely overjoyed to have found that bridge. And then you make the point that the Mondays had to hack down a tree. I mean, to hack down a tree, I would have thought is a good half day's work. I mean, a tree wide enough to walk across, and they would have had to have the axes. I mean, were you constantly surprised to come up against things and just think, how on earth did they do that?
Well, we, in our research, had known the kinds of things that the Mondays had to face, and the way they had to overcome those kind of obstacles. And we had talked about it as a team and prepared for it, but you can't really prepare for it until you're actually there and you realize what you're dealing with. So yes, finding a bridge across the river was a beautiful moment.
Amazing. And I mean, you must have done a lot of soul searching. Your camera's frozen. Hopefully, it'll come back in a second. But you must have done quite a bit of soul searching, Bryan, after the event. Is there anything that you would go back and do completely differently?
Oh yes. Part of the issue with doing these reenactments, and this wasn't the first of this type of reenactment that we've done, and not the last either. But preparing ahead of time, it's hard to get people to do this kind of thing. A lot of modern outdoors people don't want to be that uncomfortable. So you really have to, I think it's kind of mentioned in the film, that I really have to persuade people, talk people into it. And so we didn't have our team selected until just 6 months before the expedition. Then we got our funding 3 months before the expedition. Then we started making all of our gear and equipment. So there was very little time to test out the team and prepare and test out the gear and equipment. So in future, getting that team selected well in advance and then testing everything out and working together as a team and training before we go.
I love the characters. I particularly like Joe, who I think I most identified with, because in the team building, in the team dynamic, he's the guy who's perhaps slightly cynical, goes along with it, and then just explodes, and he goes full Pacino at the end. It's a real Scarface moment, isn't it, when he completely loses the plot. You're still friends with him, though, right?
Yes, Joe and I have worked very hard to preserve our friendship since the expedition, and no, we really had to. And it's interesting, when we met back with Rob Wood, the world-renowned mountaineer from the UK, who met with us after the expedition. He said, you know, Bryan, you guys have learned the lesson of what the Mondays were all about, because the Mondays were all about love. They loved one another. They loved their friends that they went exploring the outdoors with, and they loved the outdoors. And that love is what drove and motivated them. And if you and Joe have learned that lesson of love, then you've really learned you've really encapsulated what the Mondays were all about.
Wow, what an observation. What an observation. I hadn't even thought about that. That's incredible, really. I mean, I've seen quite a few films in the last couple of years that are reenactments or recreations. I mean, Greg, maybe you could answer that one. What is it about that style of telling a story that appealed to you?
I guess what appealed to me about that style of telling a story is that you know that people are going to have you know that it's going to be difficult. I mean, I know from a previous expedition that Bryan had organized that I'd been on, that the expedition members were going to have a lot of difficulty with the gear, with the clothing. There was going to be a very difficult adjustment period for the first couple of days of the expedition, and all sorts of unpredictable things were going to happen. And that's really great for a filmmaker, because you can, I can almost predict that something, missteps and mistakes and frictions, they're going to happen on the first couple of days of the expedition. So it's good to know that as a filmmaker, because as a filmmaker, you're always looking for a story to tell. I don't want to, I suppose, conflict makes for a very good story. It makes for a very compelling story.
You never thought about bailing out?
Oh, absolutely. I wanted to bail out on the first day.
Did you?
Yes, I told Bryan, I want to go home. Yeah, this is just really not fun. And the second day and the third day, I still wanted to go home. But after the third day, I could tell I was getting really good material. Like, it was just, I was shooting. I could tell I was getting good material, and when you're a filmmaker, that's your obsession, and it just won't let you stop. So I just had to keep going after that.
Yeah, Bryan, you're just too persuasive, obviously. I don't know.
For the first 2 days, I just had to keep saying to Greg, just give me 2 more days, just 2 more days. You'll still be able to turn around. And I knew that he'd end up wanting to keep going, because what he just said about he was getting some good stuff for a film. And I got to hand it to Greg and the rest of the team, who kept on going. When we first arrived, there's a logging camp that we landed at the head of the river. And there's an old guy there who lived there for 30 years in that logging camp. And he looked at us like we had 3 heads when we told him what we were doing. And he was certain he would see all of us very soon coming back out of the bush. And when I came back on day 3 with 2 guys who had to bail, I knocked on this guy's door to arrange transportation for them out. And the look on his face was, yeah, I've been expecting this. When we flew back there 23 days later, he had a very different respect for us. He said to us, as soon as he saw us, he said, I was really expecting you a lot sooner than this. Yeah. So the guys really, and the guy and Susanna, they all really stuck it out. Really bravely, I thought. And
oh, absolutely. Kudos. Yeah, kudos, definitely. So when you, obviously you wanted to make this film to tell the story of the Mondays, which is an incredible story, and of this particular expedition. But Bryan, I wonder if, did you, when you sort of dug deep and thought about it, did you discover that actually you had really personal, what were the real motivations, do you think, for you as a mountaineer, for you personally? Is there anything else?
I've always felt that we've lost something in modern times. I look back at the mountaineers 100 years ago, and I envy them. I wish I'd been born in that, a century earlier, because they were going to places that nobody knew about. They were truly exploring. And they would say to their relatives, okay, we're going off into the wilderness. We'll be gone a month. And if we're not back in 2, we're dead. I mean, they had such a passion and such a resilience that they just said, well, we want to go and explore these places. We know there's a lot of severe, horrible risks, but we're passionate about it and we're going to go do that. I don't think a lot of modern outdoors people have that today because, Everest has been climbed, the poles have been touched, and all the unexplored regions have really been explored, except perhaps in the depths of the sea and space. But there isn't that same sort of spirit of going out into the complete unknown as there was then. And so for me, that was my motivation, was to experience that same kind of experience.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I had that thought came to me just this morning, that for a mountaineer like you, the opportunity to climb anything iconic, that hasn't been done, even K2 has just been done in winter, everything's been done, hasn't it? So how does somebody like you make their mark? And I just wonder if you chose, here's a difficult question for you, I think it's a difficult question. Did you choose an expedition that had failed because deep down you thought, if I can do that, I'll have beaten the Mondays?
No, not at all. That didn't even enter my mind. Okay. Again, as I said, for me, the experience, it's really about the experience. Whether we made it to Waddington at all that would have been a bonus. Yeah. It wasn't so much about climbing the mountain. It was about knowing what it was like to go into these places with that kind of equipment. Those people, I just look at them and I think, wow, they were amazing to do that. And I wonder, can I do that? Do I have the fortitude and the strength of character that they had to go and do that? And I wanted to experience it. I wanted to know what it was like to have to battle out the mosquitoes and cross the raging rivers and get onto the glaciers in hobnail boots and using only a hemp rope tied around the waist. It was about the experience.
And the donuts. Don't forget the donuts.
Oh, that was for morale.
Yeah, no. I think the morale side of things, I thought you were excellent at. I have to say. So, Greg, would you do this again if Bryan was going to drag you off to a similarly difficult place? Would you go?
Well, he's already threatening to drag me off to a similar place. He's planning a return to the Waddington Range this coming summer in 2021. Wow. But to kind of pick up where we left off, to start the expedition at the end of the valley and then continue from there. And I've tentatively said I would go, but it kind of depends on work. I might have work commitments, so I might not be able to make it. But I've tentatively said yes.
Okay, that sounds cautiously optimistic. Then I hope everything's okay by then, and you can do that.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see.
You were picking up really from the glacier then, perhaps, from where the support team were, that sort of area. Yeah,
that's the kind of terrain we didn't get to try out with all that gear. So we're very eager to do the glacier part.
Yeah, I noticed with some amusement, and I did think it was a funny film in parts. And I noticed with some amusement that the support team, who graciously waited for you so long, and in the end they had to eat the provisions because things were starting to go off. And I noticed they included in that the whiskey, which, I mean, from what I know about whiskey, it's better if you leave it. You don't have to drink the whiskey, do you? So they can't leave. They drank all your booze and food, and then they flew out of there again, having read Crime and Punishment. Anyway, well, that's absolutely. I just really enjoyed your film so much. Good luck in the summer, and I think you're a pair of absolute heroes, Bryan. You're reminding me a little bit of. The film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson, where there's a scene in that where he tries to lift a very heavy object and throw it through the window. And he knows he couldn't lift it. He still tries though, still tries. And then afterwards he goes, at least I tried, damn it, at least, So I think you remind me a bit of him, It's not you that's mad for trying, it's everybody else who's mad for not trying, I think. So
absolutely. I'm often referred to as Don Quixote, but
Don Quixote, brilliant. Well, that makes you Pancho, I think, Greg. I don't know.
Unfortunately, yeah, pretty much.
All right. Well, let's end it there. Guys, thank you so much for the film. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody will enjoy it at the festival as well. And good luck with your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much, Greg. It's been really fun.
Yeah, thanks a lot.